Oops. You okay? Yeah, the form of it. People need taking through it carefully, like you've done in part 1. Now, it's different, very different with the doctoral students, because they have to make, and you know this, an original contribution to knowledge. And the notion of the taught programs has got to give way to the person being a researcher that is actually generating their own contributions to knowledge. You know, you can deepen things like the validation and the explanation, but there is something which is quite different about the originality as they create their own methodology. Like Ari's just got hers this week. It's just come through with this lovely abstract and, you know, acknowledgements. But so it's actually a very different process that I think you go through.
Well, I think that we are on the same page then. I think that we maybe now are into 4 parts. Part 1 is the absolute beginner.
Yeah.
Part 2 is the master's level. Part 3 is the PhD. And part 4 is the historical background and some other kind of meaty things that people might need to know at any level, really.
Well, yeah, it might be that it's actually taking people then forward into the postdoctoral inquiries with extending.
Now. So there's a 4th. Yeah. There's a 5th, that postdoctoral. And I was thinking when I was reading that section on the living poster, that's another whole chapter.
Yeah.
And I really do think we should be drawing a lot more from EJOLTS. A, that gets that work out there. And B, it's recent examples.
Yeah.
We can't really use it for part 1.
No, definitely not.
But we certainly can use it for parts 2, 3, and 4.
That's right. It can be part of, can't it? That idea of belonging to literally a postdoctoral community. There's actually, and also the conferences, Jackie, that idea of the world congresses, you know, where people are actually making a difference. Yeah.
Well, and I think given the kind of changes that we're seeing currently, this whole idea, this global citizenship, I think is certainly worthy of a chapter.
Yeah. We see Pete Mallett's, I'll send it through, hopefully. I hope in this next week it's gone through the anonymous stage, you know, of the review, because there is something there I think will also, it's excited me about this idea of regenerative human settlements, that's what he calls them, and also Ariana's focus on generativity and that idea of the global citizen. So I do think there's something here, that takes it further than the doctoral, then the postdoctoral, and then how our communities that we're part of are making further contributions as we all develop together in terms of what we're doing.
I really think too that, you know, my understanding of how to teach the master's students certainly evolved over the years that I did it. I mean, from the first group that I did with Susan Drake and Mike Mann-Casimir, and you too, to, you know, the subsequent cohorts, I got better at a lot of things, one of which was getting them through that REB.
Yes, yep.
And I mean, we haven't touched on that at all in here.
No.
And I think there's certainly some issues around the REB that we should be addressing.
Definitely, in terms of if people are putting forward for accreditation, especially where you get to that dissertation, and they've got to actually go through the ethics boards. And in fact, they do this now, you know, at Cumbria when, it's the proposal stage also with all of the doctorates. The proposal have got to go through an ethics board, but we saw it with Jesson and Gladwell, didn't we? Very powerfully. You know, there's a lot in there that he actually revealed and described, which is very good.
So I'm not trying to make this a bigger job than it already is, but it seems to be emerging as we write.
It does. Yeah, I like what you've just said, about that. Again, the postdoctoral, it leads on to something else. So it's not just a case of getting the accreditation for the masters and the doctorates. The actual notion of a community and extending one, that global citizen, what are we actually doing now? Like this afternoon, in an hour, I've got this little keynote I've got to give to McGill University on self-directed professionalism with that group that Judy's got. And
you're going to video that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that could be the basis of a whole section in the book.
Well, let's see how it goes, because, I think there are going to be 8 presentations over the 2 hours, and I'm going to respond to them. And when you look at the titles, it's the thing that we always notice with people. They don't put their eye in their inquiries. It takes quite a lot of refocusing before they see how important it is to, ask the question, how do I improve what I'm doing? And there's only one of the 8 she's got my values in her title. So I'll do this with them. Get the Camtasia. I'll see if I can do my whole screen. Yeah, will do.
So in the first part that I've written, we haven't spent a lot on that topic, on getting people to put their eye in. We've just kind of taken them right into it without discussing it.
Yeah.
But I think maybe that's what we do anyway, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we see them avoiding it, then we bring them back to it.
Yeah.
But maybe there should be a little bit in there.
I think it's more relevant to when we have not been tutoring. So when we tutor, literally our pedagogy is making that assumption. Now, when I've been involved with other places, I've got to make some effort to refocus them, to see how important it is to include the I within their inquiry. So when we're supervising, we take it for granted, and that is what we do. If they're already connected with a university, like with Judy's at the moment with McGill, I've noticed how, like with the NERI groups and the Irish ones, where they're involved in inquiry initially, like when I went over to Ireland with Dublin City University, my responses always tried to highlight the importance of their own values, looking at themselves and, their influence with others. So it might be, we think about that for part 1, because we are assuming rightly that this is how we teach. This is our pedagogy.
I think we better put some more in there about that.
Yeah.
I'll think about that. So I have been focused on kind of the introduction to part 1 in the last couple of days.
Yeah, I've got that.
I've kind of gone back to where we started, and I've been kind of thinking about these first groups that I taught and, how that evolved. And how in a year, I mean, when you think about it, in 1 year, we got them to produce their own project and write an article for this book called Act, Reflect, Revise, and present at a conference.
Yeah. And I know it's fantastic, but it's because, Jackie, you were really focused, and you could bring them together, literally in communities. So those PD days, do you remember that they were funded? You could bring them together. The expectations that you placed on them were clear. So I think this is why it was so successful.
I didn't spend a lot of time on that in there. I did talk about the supports that are needed.
Yeah.
But I didn't spend a lot of time on that. Partly because I think if you spend too much time on that, they'll think, oh, well, I don't have any of these things, so I can't do it.
Yeah.
But when we, if we look at kind of taking that the next step, no, I think it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Because that'll just say, well, I don't have time, I don't have
the other resources or whatever.
The list of things that I've made on what creating your living educational theory brings into the community. Did I overdo it? Like
Which
that's
page are you on? Which page are you thinking?
3.
On the page 3. Yep, that one. When sports are in place, creating your own living educational theory. That from about 4, 6, 8, perhaps about 10 on.
Yeah.
That reads well to me. You think there are too many?
I don't know. Have I overstated my claim?
I don't think so. The most significant experience in the novice learning is there to create their own living educator in their own eye and recognizing their embodied knowledge. It's very well, and that feels to me to be very clear.
Okay. I think what this part 1 is starting to kind of come together. The section, I want to go back and have another look at that clip of you at TEDx, whether that belongs in this part or whether it belongs in part 2. I might need to have another look at that.
Yeah.
But if I didn't use that one, what would you say was the most basic description you've made in a video for living theory?
I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that, Jackie, because I think there are a couple. That TEDx one was one that was people have said was very clear, but I'll have another think. Yeah.
And then the planner,
Yeah.
on the living education theory planner, which was the action research planner, is in part 1.
Yeah.
It's also in the Bluffer's Guide.
Yeah.
So do we see the planner being used by a master's level researcher?
Well, I definitely had it there with the master's people that I worked with. Yeah.
I just don't know if we need it in both places. Maybe.
Oh, I see. Well, it seemed that, again, it gave us something as we began. Whenever I used to go into schools and just start the groups off, that is what I used. And in about 20 minutes, people could actually go through that. And with the eye, what's your concern? What do you want to improve? So we can give that a bit more thought. But for me, it would certainly fit in part 1 in terms of what I know we've done.
Well, I know it fits in part 1. I think it also fits in part 2.
Yeah.
But I don't think we need to do the one pager, like, with the space in it.
Yeah.
You say, these are the questions that we put in the planner in part 1.
Yeah.
We think also applies to master's and even PhD level beginners.
Yeah.
And this is what we think would be different between a completed one in part 1 and a completed one in part 2.
Yeah, that's good.
And we know that many of our postdoc or cafe groups are using this and finding it quite useful.
Yeah.
But the example, I think, would be different. That's what I'm putting here.
That's right.
So I don't know whether we need to capture kind of what we've talked about today, because we've made some considerable changes in the whole text in the conversation. Do you want me to write up what we've shared?
Yeah, by all means. I think I've got most of it. I think what I need to focus on now is what you were saying, and I agree with you completely about the part 2, and to see if I can bring that up to date, to make it simpler, so that it doesn't draw much on those Bluffer's Guide and what I did in Bishops, but actually builds on that. The one thing I wasn't too sure about, and you'll have to see what you think, but that rookie teacher who moved in, the program from right at the start in 6 drafts, and there were 5 drafts in her, the thing on the web. I was really struck with them.
They're not in a visual form that could go into the book as is. The question is, and I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly as it is, but could we use it, update it, and in a way, and it doesn't have to be this person. I mean, it could be anybody. But I think we need an example. That's a good basis for the example, but it can't be used the way it is.
Yeah, okay. So again, that's what I now need to work on. You know, it was quite a radical change from part 2 as it stood, the official drafts. I've now got a much better idea just from the conversation about how I can actually make that much more relevant. So I'll have another go with that, Jackie. I like what we've just said about extending into the sense of postdoctoral inquiries. Also, there is a different pedagogy at work in supervising doctoral inquiries than the masters because of that requirement of making original contributions. You know, there's a beautiful acknowledgement from Mariana in the beginning of her thesis, as well as the abstract, you know, with the values, the first 2 sentences. And again, I think that difference between the masters and then when you're making an original contribution like you do with the culture of inquiry, I'll have to think about how to communicate the nature of that difference. It's good.
I think that the book is starting to sound more interesting to me.
Yeah, it does. It feels exciting. It does.
I mean, if somebody like, let's take Parvati, if she had this book, I mean, she could really learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
We both know we aren't going to be around forever. And
true.
And we can't do, you know, I can't take on any more than I currently have.
No. Well.
Or somebody like Michelle. I mean, if we had written this down, would it have been enough for her to do what she did?
Mm. Well, it would have been a great help, wouldn't it? Well, this is what we're thinking, isn't it? And we've got the opportunity over the next couple of days to test it out, to try and share it, and just to see, you know, with the kind of when we talk about these online conferences we're thinking of, we should be able to have it out there where others can actually use it and develop it. So that'd be great.
Well, it's interesting that Rachel actually said something about the Bluffer's Guide needs updating.
Right. Yeah.
So why don't you, when you're doing it, why don't you assume you're writing it for her, and then I mean we could test it out on her because she's obviously made the observation.
Yeah.
And how would it help her?
It's a really good idea. So I'll have a go with, you know, as I said, I'll try and play with the part 2, but I'll focus on that updating that Bluffer's Guide with Rachel in mind. That's as I say, I like that idea very much.
The references, I was thinking, there's a reference there to Tom Russell.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I wonder how he is, or
I don't know. I mean, I occasionally see his name in relation to the self-study movement, but I know he's not going to those conferences. Yeah. Because he did a lot to support, didn't he?
Oh yeah, but I mean, recently, have you seen anything that he's done or written?
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah, he did some good work.
Yeah.
I remember in particular that young teacher that he presented with. I've forgotten what his name was. Science teacher, and the teacher's observation that the problem with teaching people to do this kind of research and to take responsibility for their own learning was that they often go into environments in schools and school systems where it's not supported or accepted or even allowed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there was a book produced by this guy, Stephen Bigger, with a teacher that he supervised for his PhD was a teacher. And it was all about living contradictions. And that was one of them, you know, that you have got these values, and yet you're in a school system, which, you know, the pressure is actually to conform to these ways of working, which deny your values. Yeah. But I remember that science teacher that Tom worked with. Yeah.
What was his name?
I'm not sure.
Patrick Chin or Chan or
Not sure.
Anyway, it's funny things that come back to you. And I mean,
yeah.
when we talk about obstacles and constraints, maybe we need to add that to it.
Mm.
So there are two other chapters that are kind of still floating out here. The one is the obstacles and constraints that probably could go in part 2 as another chapter.
Yeah.
And also the workshop, which I think is another chapter in part 1.
Right. And could I just mention that I think obstacles and constraints can also come into part 3 because not all of the universities, I mean, Ari's experience is a really good example. You know, she's the nearest one to experiencing the kind of stuff I had to go through. You know, from last December to now, because it's only 2 days ago that everything was signed, you know, and they're saying we want it on, you know, the University of Lancaster website and the Cumbria website. But my God, she's had to go through, you know, tensions I didn't want anybody else to have to go through. So we might, you know, that limit, yeah.
And Liz.
Yes, oh, very much so. You know, very much so.
She wasn't prepared to share it when she was in the middle of it, but she is now.
Oh, great. Oh, no, that would be very good. Oh, wow, yeah. She was fantastic, the way that, you know, she kept going. Also, that woman, Chris Jones, she had the same kind of pressure, you know, not to do a living theory thesis. And she stuck to it, you know, at Liverpool Hope. And as I said, that went through, I put it about 4 months ago, which is great.
We'll just have to be cautious that we don't paint it as so dire that nobody would ever go through.
No one wants to do it, yes. But I think it's good to mention it. I do. I think it's good to highlight. And it does. It shows the determination and the values base and the passion, actually, that people have to keep going with their own values. Yeah. And you had it as well with Jeff Thompson, didn't you, Mike?
I did.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I think we could mention, you know, it's possible that you could encounter some of this guy.
And we survived it, so can you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, great.
It's interesting that Parvati has turned the corner on the methodology.
Good. Very good.
So she's now talking about her own methodology.
Yeah.
And the contributors are, what are, I'd have to back, but one of them is living educational theory.
Yeah, that's great.
I could send you her slideshow. It's fascinating.
Oh, that is good.
She's really, and she's getting a lot of support from Val.
Oh, that is good. No, that is very good to know. Yeah. So there's Peter Taylor. Sorry.
She's not having to fight for this.
Yeah. No, that's that is great. Yeah.
But she's also very determined. I mean, she seems, you know, so lovely, but she's very determined.
Steel as she is. It's very yeah. Brilliant.
You wouldn't want to be messing with her, I'll tell you.
Great.
Anyway, it's really great. She's going to have a very interesting thesis, and she's bringing in all of these images from her own country and from the religions there. Even though she's not a religious person, she still draws on them as metaphors.
Yeah.
So I'm very impressed with her.
Oh, that's really good.
I haven't heard anything from Rachel lately. I'm assuming that she's working on stuff for her website. It's
this morning, you know, on Fridays we have this kind of breakfast cafe conversation through Skype now, and she was there, and I mean, she's reflecting. You know, it's not like with Parvati, where Parvati is actually writing and putting things down in an organized way. Rachel is still very much gathering, you know, so she's a very exciting thinker, but she has yet to focus like Parvati has done. But yeah, I think she's okay.
And you Parvati's slideshow. It's fascinating.
Yeah, good. Please.
She's I bet she'll be done before December.
Yeah, brilliant. Mm.
Yeah, and I said to her, so is your thesis in Nepalese or in English? She said, English.
Yeah, a lot of them, they submit in English in Nepal. It's very good. Yeah, incredible, really.
So imagine that you're writing your thesis in a second language.
Well, Ari did it in her third. English is her third language.
God.
First one is Italian, the second one is German, her third one is English. It's remarkable, isn't it, honestly? Because I've got one, like that. Yeah. But do send that slideshow. That'll be good, Jackie.
Okay, so going forward, you're going to work on the Bluffer's Guide.
Yes, I am.
I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and that's a really nice idea with Rachel. Yeah.
We're focusing on master's level.
Yeah.
Bluffer's Guide.
Yeah.
So we've now got part 1 is the beginners.
Yeah.
Part 2 is MEd. Part 3 is
Doctoral.
PhD. Would we also? Yeah, let's do doctoral because it could be EDD too, couldn't it?
Yes, it could. Yes, that comes under doctoral.
And then
We have a postdoctoral as well.
Part 4 is postdoc.
Yeah.
And is Global Citizen another chapter, or is it part of the postdoc?
Well, I think because somebody like Peter Mellett, who's doing fantastic work, but hasn't got his doctorate, I think there is something about the Global Citizen, like with Julia, that I think we could bring in, people that are making this kind of contribution with these values. But if you like, it's not postdoctorate because they haven't got their doctorate. So let's think about
part 5. It's a part 5.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And then where did the historical piece go? I guess we've missed that then, have we? So part 3, part 4 is the historical. Yeah,
I'm not quite sure whether when they're doing a PhD, they have to engage with that. And part of a master's is actually coming to grips with ideas and literature and history. So let's just think about that, because in the Bluffer's Guide, there's a whole section on the history of, action research. I can do that about living theory. So let me just see if that then fits and develops, introduce it in part 2 and develop it in part 3.
So it's a chapter in part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Okay.
neat.
Yeah. Great. Right. McGill.
I'll keep on charging away with this part 1, making sure I've got enough examples and that explicating things clearly enough. And
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really good.
And we'll see you Sunday morning.
Sunday, yeah.
And then Wednesday.
Yeah. If that's okay.
So what I've been doing is every day I make a new version of it.
Yeah.
Because I actually one day I started on an old version. And I thought, oh shit. Yes. So I not only have to make sure I do it every day, I have to throw out the old version so I'm not.
Yeah, in a different folder and just keep today's date. That's important. Good.
Okay, nice to see you.
Yeah, and you. Bye-bye then. Ta-da.
Bye-bye.